The Hasbro CEO has finally broken his silence about the OGL fiasco today during a previously scheduled investor call. And the reports are just coming out. We're going to go to Polygon today for the article. We're just doing a quick read through. But basically, it says we misfired on the OGL, but have since course corrected and claims that revenues were not significantly impacted by cancellations of D&D Beyond. So this is continuing the same rhetoric that was recently mentioned by the executive producer Kyle Brinks, who claimed, "Oh, no, those D&D subscription cancellations, those D&D Beyond cancellations, those didn't impact revenue." This is something where they're having to backtrack now and put out fires because they need to course correct and they have to make investors feel comfortable. Also, with the Bank of America announcement, the second announcement that the stock has continued to be devalued. November was the first announcement, and then this past Tuesday, they came back and said again, yeah, it's still underperforming, and we expect further declines. Hasbro's in a weird state right now because obviously, Wizards of the Coast is not their only thing. They've got a lot of irons in the fire with Hasbro. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and dive into this because it's a little piece of evening news for everybody. So, let's get in here. It says Hasbro CEO Chris Cocks told investors that the organized protest against changes to the Dungeons and Dragons OGL, specifically the mass cancellation of D&D Beyond accounts, will have little to no impact on Wizards of the Coast's bottom line in 2023. Those comments were made today during the investor call. It said, we'd misfired on updating our open game license, but we have since course corrected and are delivering a strong outcome for the community and game. Now, what's interesting here is they talk about the bottom line for 2023. He's making a prediction here, of course, because we're early in 2023, and there's a lot left to happen in the year. They have the movie coming out this summer. They've got additional books that are coming out. They have additional video games that are launching, such as Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3 this fall. There's a lot of irons in the fire, and the tabletop component of Dungeons and Dragons is only one small portion of what Wizards of the Coast has going on when you talk about um, Magic the Gathering as well. And this is about Hasbro overall. So this is them basically, or him, I should say, coming out and saying, that don't worry, investors, everything's going to be fine. The logic here around the cancellation of D&D Beyond, of course, was that reducing revenues on a strategic digital platform would help leverage against proposed changes to the OGL, which did make international headlines, as it mentions here, and it did, in my mind and in many people's mind, it did force them into action. Now they're claiming that nothing that we did, none of the voices that were out there talking about the international outcry, the cancellations, none of that mattered. None of that impacts their bottom line. Of course, until we actually see the financials, we don't know if that's actually the case or not. But it's an interesting prediction for him to make, and it feels like they're just continuing the PR spin to try to make it feel like, no impact was made by people being upset with the D&D brand. He said we had some subscription cancellations, but they were comparatively minor in the totality of both the D&D profit and loss and the Wizards profit and loss. Now again, I don't think they can make that prediction because we're so early in the 2023 year that it remains to be seen what that's going to look like in the terms, in the long scope of this year's financial fiscal year. He said, he went on to add that in contacting those users who did cancel their subscriptions, the company found that a lot of them are very open to restarting their subscriptions. Of course, they're going to say that. I'm not very open to it. I'd love to see that data. Show us that data. Says Hasbro acquired D&D Beyond in April of 2022. We previously reported on it last year, and Cox said Thursday that his organization has since made good on its investment with around a 20% user growth in 2022 and a commensurate growth in revenue, but that was 2022. He says it's a great platform, it's a really good value, and it's something that has been a good growth factor for us. He says these statements were obviously made during the quarterly earnings call on the heels of a spectacularly bad news cycle for the Rhode Island-based game and toy giant. In November, analysts at Bank of America accused the company of destroying the long-term value of Magic the Gathering, killing its golden goose by overprinting cards, and they continued to reiterate that this past Tuesday. It says here, while the OGL situation has settled down somewhat, consumer sentiment appears to be in flux. Says much of the D&D brand's future will depend on the success of the movie coming out this summer, Honor Among Thieves, and the Baldur's Gate 3 launch, which he said should boost revenues in the fall. Says meanwhile, employee discontent at Wizards is simmering, and smaller competitors having to feel they pitch themselves at more ethical alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons. I find it suspect that they can attempt to make a claim that the cancellations had little to no impact. Again, I have not seen any numbers. The rumored number that I've seen touted is that more than 50,000 people canceled their subscription during the 2 to 3 chaos surrounding the OGL. How many of those people went back? I don't know. Haven't seen any reports since then. I do know that there was a petition that was signed by more than 70,000 people. Supposedly, all of the people that signed that petition were also people who had, or I shouldn't say all, that's a misrepresentation. I think that many of those people had also had D&D Beyond subscriptions that they canceled. I never had a D&D Beyond subscription. I did create an account there, maybe whenever they announced the new Dragonlance book. Got to be like 2 years ago. I think I created an account in anticipation of getting involved in that, but then this winter we just got busy with stuff and I never worried about it, and then I'm glad I didn't, because then January hit and all this chaos happened. So I never had an account that I needed to cancel in the first place. But I don't think anybody can make any statements that they were not significantly impacted, because we haven't seen the financials yet and won't until the fiscal year ends. They might have some data that they're looking at right now for the first quarter, but we're only in February, so that's recent. That's last month. So I think it's way too early to be making those predictions. In any case, remember that Hasbro does way more than just Wizards of the Coast. They have their hands in a lot of different pies. So Wizards of the Coast is only one small thing. So the big thing for everybody here is that this was a investor call for Hasbro overall as a company. So everybody out there who's wanting to protest against Wizards of the Coast and we need to hurt Hasbro, the commentary that they're making here, I feel in the scope of the Hasbro conversation, yes, you're right. It's probably not going to impact Hasbro's overall earnings if we look at it that way. When we look at the Wizards of the Coast earnings, that's what I'm referring to. So maybe I need to clarify that a little bit in my statements here in this video, because Wizards of the Coast is an entity underneath Hasbro, and Wizards of the Coast is one small thing, and they've suffered a huge hit with not only the Magic the Gathering stuff last year, but also this year. Now, Hasbro owning so many other things and so many other intellectual properties and toys and everything else that they do, there's a lot more going on than just Wizards of the Coast. And for people who think that boycotting Dungeons and Dragons or canceling their D&D subscription is going to have any great impact on Hasbro, yeah, that's not a reality. That's just something that they would need to screw up in a lot of different arenas, not just Wizards of the Coast, for Hasbro to feel any sort of hit overall. Anyway, it's news. I'm reporting on it. Like, subscribe, hit that bell icon if you want more like this. Don't forget to support in all the ways listed down there. Some of you do. Thank you for that support. It keeps the lights on, air conditioning going, my cat's fed, me fed, and me doing more stuff like this. Don't forget you can also go over to our Patreon page to get a copy of our tabletop sourcebook, adventure module, book series, and the point and click adventure game. And I'll see everybody in the next episode as we have more news. Don't forget, every Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Central here on YouTube, This Week in Tabletop RPG News. See you in the live stream. Until then, everybody, safe gaming, happy gaming, stay safe, all those good things. If I can learn how to talk. I need more coffee.